more natural than you pick up a mushroom or something like that, you ingest it, and my God, you're having visions. You're seeing life in a new way. You're seeing through the appearances. You have a greater understanding, or at least the confines of your common sense understanding is exploded. And it's transformational.
They elicit a whole spectrum of psychological effects. Probably the ones that people find most interesting as far as alterations of consciousness. They have profound perceptual effects, emotional effects, cognitive effects. They have effects on your sense of self and on your relationship to your body and to your will. So they kind of cut across the entire spectrum of human consciousness.
It's rare that people rush to repeat it, over and over again regularly. It's not that you have a craving to take the drug. You have a curiosity about the experience, and you often have to overcome your reluctance to take the drug in order to have that. You see this with ayahuasca very strongly. If you drink lots of ayahuasca, you actually develop a physiological aversion syndrome. And this is well known where with other substances where it tastes so bad and you get sick and all that, and you actually, really don't want to consume it, but you do, and somehow you always get it down, and you're always glad you did, because you overcome the aversion and you learn so much from it, but it's definitely not addicting. Quite the opposite.
I think it is possible for people to have an abusive relationship with a psychedelic drug, although compared to the other drugs of abuse, that's certainly a lot less common. For example, the kinds of relationships that most people have with heroin or alcohol or tobacco, those kinds of drugs. Psychedelics, as a rule anyway, tend to be taken sparingly, once a week, once a month, once a year, as opposed to daily. And in fact, in the case of most of the classical psychedelic drugs, like LSD, psilocybin, DMT, if you take them regularly, you quickly develop tolerance, and you stop responding, especially strongly after the second or third day that you take a psychedelic drug. That's not quite the case with DMT, but the debilitating effects of DMT, tend to limit its repetitive habitual use as well.
No, there's no evidence that entheogens are addictive. I mean, ayahuasca or mushrooms or peyote are definitely, or iboga are definitely not addictive substances. I mean, you can take them and not take them again for years. I mean, they can be a little bit psychologically addictive, like any experience. If somebody really loves it, they may want to go back and have the experience again and again. But generally, you really don't find abusive patterns with people who make use of these substances.
Look in your own pharmacopoeia, look at the drugs that you're taking and note their side effects. And how many people a year have died from inhaling marijuana? Goose egg. Now, look at how many people die from drinking alcohol. You've got hundreds and thousands of people. You've got the people who are completely distraught over the alcohol addiction and things like this. It's countless billions of dollars and millions of lives. Or, think of the people that get creamed when the drunk driver, hurts someone. So there's so many repercussions that are much worse with alcohol, and yet it's legal. And so the idiocy of our current position on cannabis is really sad. But my prayer is that the grassroots movement will continue to show its obvious advantage to our culture by a kind of strict integration and taxing and, so making it a legally available substance, which I think would also make us a little more willing to note the importance of the entheogens, because in a sense it's a mild entheogen, cannabis.
At the same time, we've conflated them with other substances like heroin and speed and cocaine, which are more addictive, more artificial, where we've taken, in the case of heroin and cocaine, we took naturally occurring plant substances, but then we did a chemical process to them to kind of amp up the active component and separate it. And so I have a friend, Morgan, who's an herbalist, and he makes a distinction between the whole plant medicine approach that indigenous people were mostly, using, and our kind of attitude of just isolating the agent that causes a certain reaction and then amplifying that effect so that it leads to addictive patterns.
A culture is what it eats, and an individual's personality is often largely a reflection of their diet. There has not been a human culture that did not bear upon it the stamp of its relationship to certain plants which altered the individual and mass psyche. We can think of numerous examples, the influence, for instance, of sugar on the growth of 19th century mercantilism, or the way in which the British manipulated opium policy in the Far East, or, as you mentioned, alcohol, which has always been the drug of choice in Western culture. Who can imagine modern industrial office culture without coffee? These are major drug dependencies that have placed their stamp on the lives of millions and millions of people. It's simply that we choose to linguistically define it in such a way that the effect is not something most people are cognizant of.
It's funny that all of these things are lumped under one label, drugs. I come from a sort of a peasant family. Both my parents were farmers and were just immigrants, basically. And when my mother found out that I was in California, that I took drugs, it broke her heart. And there was no way that I could explain to her what it was I was doing, because that word drug just had such an impact on her mind. It was about the worst thing her firstborn son could ever do. And it was just, it was one of the saddest things in my life that I could not explain to Mom what it was I was doing. Mom was a very religious person. She went to Catholic church every day, and I could not find a way to tell her that I was doing the same thing that she was doing. And I still, would not know how to tell Mom, what the difference was between her going to church and me taking entheogens, searching for God through chemicals.